In this video, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and complete together the half versus whole step worksheet, where we're going to be tested on not only being able to identify it on the keyboard, but also based on letters, and then also having to create them by adding our own accidentals, which will be fun. So let's start with the keys. So here we have, first of all, asking HS or WS, which HS is of course for half step and then WS is for whole step. Now we have specifically two keys right here. It kind of looks like a little bit of a smiley face. But what this is asking is that from this note right here, which is a B, to this note right here, which is a C, is that a half step or a whole step? Now remember, this is the tricky one, and it feels like a little bit of a trick question even though it really isn't. These two notes, again, are right next to each other. There's no black key in between. They're right next to each other. They're adjacent, as we would say. And so this distance right here is a half step. Remember that a half step is whenever we go from one note to the very next note. Doesn't matter if it's a white key or a black key. Now, here, and whenever we're really looking for whole steps, if I'm being quite honest, we're looking for some sort of a small gap, right? A one key gap. So you'll notice here we start on this dot, which is on E, and then we go to this first black key, right? So the question that you have to ask yourself is, okay, do we go by one key over or do we go two keys over? And here you'll notice that we skip over a key, right? And so here we would have WS for a whole step. And again, this is another one of those tricky ones because again, E to F, right? E and F are right next to each other. There's no black key in between. So we have E that we would end up having to go to F sharp. Now, in terms of the next one, what we end up having specifically here is that we end up having two black keys, right? Kind of tricky, right? Two black keys, a little bit tricky. But again, we still have to ask that same question, okay? Do we go to the very next note or do we have a key in between? And we indeed do, right? We skip over this white key that's in between. And so here we specifically have a whole step. That's what we end up having here is a whole step. Now, in the next one, where we're going from this A, right? This A right here, and then we're going up to this black key. So we're going from a white key to the very next black key. So here we have a half step, okay? So those are the first four answers there. So what you're really asking yourself with the half step is that am I going to the very next key? And then with the whole step, you're asking, okay, am I skipping over one key? Pretty much. Now for the next one, which is whole steps versus half steps, but with letters, what we're looking for is that are we specifically, whenever we're looking at the notes, and a really good trick for this is oftentimes looking at, okay, do we have any accidentals or not, right? Do both notes have accidentals? Does one of the notes have an accidental, and which way does that go, right? In terms of the accidental, where does it put us? So like for example, when we have C to D flat, imagine just for a second from C to D, right? C to D, we of course know that there's a black key in between those two. So C to D would be a whole step. But then whenever we have the D flat brings it closer to the C. It brings it to the left. So here what we have is we have a half step from C to D flat. Now here we have A to B. We have two letters that specifically don't have anything on them. And especially with the white keys, almost always you're gonna have a black key in between, right? The only exception of that are of course E to F and then B to C. So here we would have a whole step because of course in between A and B there should be like that A sharp, that black key there. And again, if you wanted to, you can always check right here, right? So A would be right here on the keyboard. Again, we have a black key right there and then there's B. So again, that would be a whole step. Specifically, we have now F sharp to G. F sharp to G, same idea. So what we're asking ourselves is that, well, do both of them have sharps or flats? Are accidentals? Do none of them have anything? Here we have an accidental. So most likely we're gonna be dealing with a half step here, and it's just a matter of checking, right? So whenever we're thinking about it, get rid of the accidental for a second. From F to G, is there a black key in between? And if you were to go ahead and imagine it, again, yes, there is, right? Remember that there are only two places where there isn't a black key in between. It's E to F and then B to C. So when we have that F sharp, that moves us, of course, closer. So F going to F sharp, going to G, right? That ends up moving us closer to G. So what we would end up having here is a half step. Okay? And this last one, now this one's a little bit tricky because remember, if you remember E to F, right? E to F is that one place or one of the places that doesn't have a black key in between. And this E flat sends us further to the left, so further away from F. So this one right here, it's quite tricky, but this one's actually a whole step. And again, we can go ahead and take a look at that here. I'm gonna go ahead and just draw in this one. But again, here's E and here's F, right? That would be a half step. The E flat would send us right here on this black key. So that distance all of a sudden ends up becoming a whole step. Again, we're at that point skipping over a half step, right? We're skipping over one key, which is the E. And so we're gonna end up having a whole step. Now, in this last column, what we're gonna be working on is adding accidentals. A couple of things just real quickly to keep in mind whenever adding accidentals. So just remember, a sharp kind of looks like tic-tac-toe, but the best way to draw a sharp is two parallel vertical lines and then two parallel diagonal lines, specifically going upwards. In terms of a flat literally looks like a lowercase b, but it's a little pointier, a little bit pointier. We won't have to really use natural signs in this one, but a natural sign kind of looks like an L, and then we just do that same thing, but going down. In terms of double sharp, you can just go ahead and draw an X. That works just fine. And then a double flat, of course, you just draw two flats right next to each other. Now, with this one, there's going to be a prompt underneath every single one of them, and then what you have to do is you have to be able to fulfill that prompt. So here we specifically end up having C to D, and it says change one to make a half step. So what we're doing here specifically is that we have to change one of them to make a half step. It doesn't matter which one. So in order to make these closer together, again, C and D are right next to each other. So what you have to do is you either have to move C closer to the right, so you have to move it up, or you have to move D down. So there's actually two options for this. I'll go ahead and draw both. But one option is to go ahead and do C sharp to D. Again, that C sharp will move the C closer, right, to D. And so that would end up making it a half step difference. You could also add a flat to the D. So you could make it D flat. And that would then move the D to the left closer to C. So both of those options would work. So there's actually two answers to that one that could work. For the next one, what should we add to the B to make a whole step? That's actually a very, very good question. So again, one of the things that you can keep in mind with whole steps is you're trying to get it so that there's a skip over one note. And then oftentimes with whole steps is that if, like, for example, one of them doesn't have anything, the other one most of the time will also not have anything. The only exception, again, of that is E to F and then B to C. So whenever we're dealing with this here, we have an A flat and a B. Again, that's not one of those exceptions, right? It's not B to C or E to F. So it would be easy enough to just say, oh, okay, I just have to make that B a B flat in order to match, and that should be good enough. But again, we'll go ahead and check that over here. So I'm going to use the keyboard from number 3, but of course, A flat would be this one right here, and then we would have A, and then here we would end up having B flat on the right if we went to B flat. So that would be perfect, right? If it was B sharp, right, you could always try, you know, other accidentals, but again, B sharp would send us further to the right. So that wouldn't work out very, very well. So we would want to have a B flat here. Now, from F to G, what should we add to F to make a half step? So this one's actually asking you to add only something to F. But again, F and G, right, they aren't one of the exceptions, right? E to F or B to C. So they're gonna have a black note in between. So currently F and G would be a whole step. So in order to make it a half step, all you have to do is again, you have to get that F closer by one key to the G. And so in order to get F closer again, we have to move F to the right by a half step. So we would go ahead and add a sharp here. Now in this last one, we have a little bit of a challenge, which is specifically, we have an F and an F, okay? And it says, what can we add to make the distance a whole step? Now this is quite tricky. The reason why is because, of course, if we had F and then F, if I add a sharp to the F, right, it would only be a half step, right? And so this is where we have to use, again, one of these guys, either our double sharp or our double flat, because those guys will send us automatically up a whole step. So if I'm being quite honest, this one doesn't specify which one you do. So you have a couple of options. You could do something like this, F to F double sharp. That would work just fine, okay? F to F double sharp, by the way, just sounds like you playing F to G on the piano. The other option would be to do like F double flat to F. That would also work. F double flat, by the way, sounds the same as not E, but E flat. Remember that whenever we have F and E, they're a half step away. So F flat is technically the same thing as E. You might be wondering, of course, why do we have so many different names for things? Part of it has to do with scales and consistency within pieces of music. And then part of it has to do also with the rules of like chords. Whenever we start to get into chords and talking about chords and how music is made, it starts to make sense why we start having F flats and whatnot. A lot of the times it's all about consistency and relationships and following certain writing rules. But this specifically has been a video explaining and going through the half step versus whole step worksheet. Hopefully that this has been helpful and we've been able to understand things. If you had trouble with this, again, you can go ahead and leave in the comments what you might have questions about or specific instances that you might be worried about. But have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining me today in this video.